All right, imagine the sheer political drama of this moment. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, one of Keir Starmer's closest political allies, someone who has defended him through scandal after scandal, who has stood by him when others were jumping ship, who has been one of the most visible faces of this government on the international stage, has just turned on the Prime Minister. We are not talking about mild criticism here. We are not talking about gentle suggestions that perhaps things could be handled better. We are talking about a full-throated attack on Starmer's handling of the Mandelson scandal, a public declaration that the Prime Minister has lost his way, an unmistakable signal that Lammy is distancing himself from a sinking ship and potentially positioning himself for whatever comes next. This is the political equivalent of your best mate standing up at your wedding and telling everyone you are making a massive mistake. It is brutal, it is devastating, and it is happening at precisely the moment when Starmer is already on the brink of total collapse, when his government is hanging by a thread, when one more push could send the whole thing toppling over the edge. When your foreign secretary publicly turns on you, when someone who should be defending you internationally is instead attacking you domestically, you are not just in trouble, you are finished. And the timing could not be more perfect for maximum damage and maximum political theater. If you want to catch every moment of this spectacular betrayal as it plays out and see whether this is the final blow that brings down Starmer's government, hit that subscribe button and smash notifications right now, because Westminster is about to get even more chaotic and you absolutely cannot miss what happens next. So, let us talk about what exactly Lammy has said and done, because the details are absolutely extraordinary and reveal just how fractured the Labour government has become. Reports suggest that Lammy has given interviews, possibly made statements in Parliament or to party colleagues, where he has been openly critical of how Starmer handled the Mandelson scandal from the very beginning. He is apparently saying that proper procedures were not followed, that concerns were raised and ignored, that the Prime Minister prioritized personal loyalty over good governance, and that the subsequent cover-ups and evasions have made a bad situation catastrophically worse. These are devastating critiques coming from anyone, but coming from the Foreign Secretary, from someone who is supposed to be part of the inner circle, from someone whose job literally depends on maintaining the confidence and trust of the Prime Minister, this is political dynamite. What makes Lammy's intervention particularly significant is his position and his relationship with Starmer. These are not distant colleagues who barely know each other. These are people who have worked together for years, who have been part of the same political project, who presumably have had countless private conversations about strategy and direction. For Lammy to go public with criticism suggests that those private conversations have broken down completely, that he has concluded Starmer is beyond saving, that protecting his own political future requires separating himself from the Prime Minister before they both go down together. It is a calculated betrayal, and calculation makes it even more damning because it suggests this is not an emotional outburst but a considered judgment that Starmer is finished. The timing of Lammy's turn is absolutely perfect for maximum damage. Starmer is already reeling from multiple scandals, already facing calls for resignation from multiple directions, already watching his authority evaporate. This is the moment when he most needs his cabinet to close ranks, to present a unified front, to defend him publicly even if they have doubts privately. Instead, his foreign secretary is publicly attacking him, which sends an unmistakable message to every other MP and party member. It is acceptable to turn on Starmer now. The loyalty bonds are broken. It's every person for themselves. Once that mentality takes hold, once the instinct for self-preservation overcomes party discipline, governments collapse very quickly. The specific criticisms that Lammy is apparently making are worth examining because they go to the heart of Starmer's failures. The allegation that proper procedures were not followed for Mandelson's appointment is not new, but hearing it from the Foreign Secretary gives it new weight and credibility. Lammy would have been in cabinet meetings where this was discussed. He would have seen the relevant papers. He would know what warnings were given and how they were received. If he is saying procedures were not followed, he is speaking from direct knowledge, not speculation. That makes the criticism much harder to dismiss or spin away.
The claim that concerns were raised and ignored is even damaging because it suggests not just incompetence, but deliberate disregard for proper governance. If multiple people were raising red flags about Mandelson and Starmer pushed ahead anyway, that is not an error in judgment, that is potentially an abuse of power. And if Lammy witnessed this happening and now is willing to speak about it publicly, that suggests the evidence is strong enough and serious enough that he feels protecting Starmer is no longer viable or desirable. The accusation that cover-ups have made things worse is particularly devastating because it addresses not just the original scandal, but Starmer's response to it. Even if the initial decision to appoint Mandelson could be defended as a judgment call, the subsequent attempts to hide information, to stonewall legitimate questions, to mislead Parliament and the public, those are undefensible. And Lammy pointing this out publicly is essentially saying that Starmer has compounded his errors with dishonesty, which destroys any remaining credibility the Prime Minister might have had. The political calculation behind Lammy's decision to turn on Starmer is fascinating to consider. He must know that this will end his relationship with the Prime Minister, that if by some miracle Starmer survives, Lammy's career in this government is over. So he is betting that Starmer will not survive, that there will be a new Labour leader soon, and by getting on the right side of history now, by being seen as someone who stood up for principle even when it meant breaking with the Prime Minister, he positions himself favorably for whatever comes next. It is a ruthless political calculus, but it is probably the right call given the circumstances. The reaction within Westminster to Lammy's intervention has been absolutely electric. Opposition MPs are gleefully seizing on it as proof that even Starmer's own cabinet knows he is unfit for office. They are quoting Lammy's criticisms back at the government, using them as ammunition in parliamentary debates, pointing out that these are not opposition attacks, but assessments from the Foreign Secretary himself. When the government's own ministers are making the opposition's arguments for them, the situation is beyond salvaging. But perhaps more significantly, the reaction from within Labour is one of shock mixed with a sense of inevitability. Many MPs apparently saw this coming, recognizing that Lammy was positioning himself carefully, that his recent public comments had been subtly distancing himself from Starmer's positions, but seeing it happen so explicitly, so publicly, so devastatingly, that is still jarring, and it is triggering calculations in other ministers and MPs about whether they need to make similar moves, whether sticking with Starmer is worth the damage to their own careers, whether the time is come to openly break with a failed leader. The media is having an absolute field day with this development. The image of the Foreign Secretary turning on his own Prime Minister is too delicious, too dramatic to resist. Every outlet is running extensive coverage, getting reaction from political figures across the spectrum, analyzing what this means for Starmer's survival prospects. The consensus seems to be that when your Foreign Secretary publicly criticizes you over a major scandal, your days are numbered in single digits. This is not the kind of blow you recover from. Social media has exploded with reaction, with people sharing clips of previous instances where Lammy defended Starmer, contrasting them with his current criticisms, highlighting the dramatic shift. The commentary is savage, with people calling Lammy everything from a principled whistleblower to a cynical opportunist, depending on their political perspective. But regardless of the motivation, everyone agrees on the impact. This is devastating for Starmer and potentially terminal for his premiership. The international implications of having your Foreign Secretary publicly at war with the Prime Minister are significant and concerning. Foreign governments rely on clear lines of authority and communication. When the person representing Britain's foreign policy is publicly contradicting and criticizing the Prime Minister, that creates confusion and uncertainty about who is actually setting British policy. Diplomatic partners don't know who to talk to or whose assurances to believe. It is yet another way in which domestic political chaos damages Britain's international standing and effectiveness. The question of what Lammy wants to achieve with this intervention is interesting to consider. Is he genuinely motivated by principle, by a belief that Starmer's behavior has been so wrong that it needs to be called out even at personal cost? Or is this primarily about positioning, about being seen as the person who stood up to a failed leader so that when leadership elections come, he can point to his courage and integrity? The answer is probably some combination of both, but the political calculation is definitely a significant factor. Politicians rarely destroy their relationships with prime ministers purely out of principle when there is nothing to be gained politically. The timing relative to other developments is worth noting as well. This is coming on top of other cabinet resignations, on top of mounting scandal, on top of collapsing poll numbers. It is not happening in isolation, but as part of a cascade of failures and crises that are overwhelming the government. Each individual blow might be survivable on its own, but the cumulative impact of scandal after scandal, resignation after resignation, betrayal after betrayal,